Martin Luther King didn't get killed because of I had a dream. He had something else he was going to talk about.
And I think the time has come to bring to bear the power of the direct action, the nonviolent direct action movement on the basic economic conditions that we face all over the country. Nonviolence has been a tremendous force in grappling with the social problem of legal segregation and the syndrome of deprivation surrounding that system.
Throughout the teachings in school, I never agreed with this assessment because from my eyes, it was not the nonviolent approach that changed or brought attention. It was the very violent approach that was taken towards the nonviolent that got the change. It was the brutality of people peacefully marching and being beaten, being shot, being attacked by dogs, being beat with sticks, bricks, and bottles. It was that violent action that brought about change. Let's be clear. It is definitely going to take some serious action to change this.
About our world, that for the first time to his knowledge, we've ever seen in a UN resolution around the Security Council, America side with China and Russia in condemning what Putin did and not their European democratic allies.
And of course it has been a major force in grappling with the political problem of the denial of the right to vote. But in winning victories like the Civil Rights Bill of '64 and the Voting Rights Bill of 1965 around the issue of segregation and voting rights, we discovered that these legislative strides did very little to improve the lot of the millions of Negroes in the ghettos of the North and in the nation generally. In other words, it did very little to penetrate the lower depths of Negro deprivation in communities all over.
So I feel like we are regurgitating the same type of tactics and trying to be benevolent and aspirational and inspirational as to good triumphs over evil. But in the world, in reality, on the ground, just as Martin Luther King realized, the evil is real. And it's hard to fight evil with the tactics of absolute purity and goodness. I believe we may have to cultivate our strategies and take the gloves off like they have a long time ago. They ran up in the Capitol and destroyed the White House. That's how they got this leverage. That's how they got this momentum. They tore shit up. And they've been pushing on every stride that we made as far as civil rights. They've been pushing on the necks of every legislative step to claw back what happened during the Obama years. And I'm not even talking about geopolitical stuff. I'm just talking about the rights of people in general. You know, the LGBT community, the black rights, the Asian rights, the Mexican rights, because it seems like rights are okay and never challenged, hate to say it, but when it's a white right. So the war that was waged on Confederate statues and, you know, just the total telling of history being whitewashed has brought about clawing back all of that advancement by the opposition. And so when the opposition did a full court press, what I'm talking about, the full court press is what I don't see the Democrats doing. I don't see them attacking on all fronts. All I see are lawsuits. I don't see enough grassroots ground game, and I feel like they're just hoping that things get bad enough that we'll just vote the other way this time because it's so bad, because that has been the trend. But what we're forgetting is that this is a whole new type of monster, a whole new type of machine. There used to be pride. There used to be ethical values. There used to be a basic understanding of human rights, humanity in general. So when you look at things that's happening like in Palestine, and we're funding it with very little, opposition to them completely committing genocide, we're funding it. When you look at Ukraine, we are taking an assessment, hey, when is the greatest opportune moment to try and seize on the value of Ukraine? Because that's the art of the deal. So you can forget about that Budapest agreement. You can forget about the lawsuits, and you can start looking at authoritarian way of doing things, which is just to simply steamroll this process to make sure that it doesn't get rolled back. Did we not see Putin destroy his opposition, kill everyone, get rid of his total Congress or parliament, whatever you want to call it? They had no power. So when I hear things like this,
that we understand it. Listen, we launched the Rapid Response Task Force and Litigation Working Group. It's going to be led by Joe Neguse and, of course, a brilliant constitutional lawyer, Jamie Raskin, to be able to respond to and work with our allies like Tish James and others in part of what we are responding to. Listen, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they're flooding the zone in part to create distress, to create a sense of invincibility and inevitability. But the reality is, there have been more than 75 different lawsuits that have been filed by democracy reform groups, civil rights reform groups, by attorney generals like Tish James and others. And we're winning in court. They're losing. More than 35 different unconstitutional and unlawful executive orders and administrative actions have been challenged. And they're not winning those cases in terms of the Trump administration. They're losing over and over and over again. That's been a forceful pushback. And that, of course, will continue. The congressional battles will continue. And the mobilization in the communities will continue.
so they say that this will continue. To what end? If we are in an authoritarian grab, and if all we have to go on is history as a precedent for these type of actions, since when has the courts, ever worked for us? In the end, in the absolute end. And I'm talking about when a dictator, authoritarian takes completely over, when people start dying, when he deems them to be enemies of the state. What's the plan?
In Russia, it is a dangerous profession to oppose the government in general and Vladimir Putin in particular. Let's have a look at some of the Russians who died under suspicious circumstances in the past 14 years. In 2004, journalist Anna Politkovskaya, a critic of Vladimir Putin, was poisoned, and evidence that could prove it was destroyed. She survived writing an article about the experience, but she was gunned down in the elevator of her Moscow apartment 2 years later. A month after that, former agent Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned in London by a radioactive substance in his tea. Litvinenko became a critic of the Russian government after leaving the KGB, which is the successor, or the KGB's successor, the FSB. In one of the most outrageous deaths, Oleg Zhukovsky was killed in 2007. The senior executive at the Russian bank VTB allegedly committed suicide by putting a bag over his head, tying himself to a chair, and throwing himself into his swimming pool. Zhukovsky opposed the Kremlin takeover of the bank he worked at. In 2009, human rights lawyer Stanislav Markelov and Anastasia Babarova were killed in Moscow, shot in broad daylight. Markelov is believed to have been the main target. He represented journalists who were critical of Putin and brought cases against members of the Russian military, among others, for human rights abuses. Human rights activist Natalia Estemirova was kidnapped in 2009, then shot on the side of the road. She was a frequent associate of two of the activists who I mentioned earlier. And then there's the Russian tax lawyer Sergei Magnitsky, who was arrested and died in custody in 2009. Severe beatings and mistreatment allegations are blamed for his death. Magnitsky allegedly found tax officials and police officers were bilking citizens out of millions of dollars. Authorities dropped the investigation into his death, but his name lives on.
Now, it is that last one. Listen again.
Magnitsky allegedly found tax officials and police officers were bilking citizens out of millions of dollars. Authorities dropped the investigation into his death, but his name lives on in the U.S.
Elon Musk are largely the opposite of his public claims, which are amplified on his billion-dollar media platforms about cutting government spending or backing transparency or patrolling supposed waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, and conflicts, because here you go. Under the Trump administration, a top agency, you see here, is handing a $2 billion plus contract to Elon Musk's company.
In Russia's Far East today, it looked like a parliamentary election. Candidates on a poster, voting booths, ballot boxes. In Moscow, the patriarch considered his options and used a ballot box for one. Even President Putin himself voted from his office. But what preceded today? Months of unprecedented crackdown. The authoritarian state targeted dissent, banned protests, and labeled the chief opposition party led by Alexei Navalny the equivalent of Al-Qaeda. To evade government censorship, Navalny's campaign created an app that endorsed independent candidates. But today, Apple and Google removed the app from their Russian stores.
From a Republican-led town hall. First belittled by the moderator.
And look at this little girl is afraid to leave.
Before a confrontation breaks out. Kootenai County Sheriff Robert Norris asking the woman to leave or be arrested, then trying to forcibly remove her.
You out now! You out now! Let's go!
This man is assaulting me! She's then pulled out of her seat by three unidentified men in black clothing, later identified as private security.
Show your badge! I tell you again, the cavalry's not coming. Apple is not taking off any Truth Social, X, Instagram, Facebook, Amazon. They're not doing that. As a matter of fact, they're investing in it.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Well, Apple announcing a hefty boost in spending in the United States. So here's what we know. CEO Tim Cook sat down for a meeting with President Donald Trump last week, and then he committed to bump in spending about $500 billion over the next 4 years. Mr. Trump reacted to that investment in a post on social media.
So they're controlling the narrative. This is still a full court press towards dictatorship, authoritarianism, and religious control. Make no mistake about it. We've seen it before. Come on. Putin grabbed all the oligarchs and got them under his control.
How does Russian President Vladimir Putin keep his country's war machine churning? It should have fallen apart by now. Russia has lost over 670,000 soldiers to death or injury since the Ukraine war began in February 2022. Its equipment losses have been almost as catastrophic. Almost 9,000 tanks now lie in ruins on Ukrainian roads. Russia has also lost 17,895 armored vehicles, around 20,000 artillery systems, and about a third of its dreaded Black Sea fleet. The situation has gotten so bad for Putin that he's been forced to rely on Soviet-era equipment to keep the pressure up on an enemy he should have easily overrun in a matter of weeks. Yet Russia keeps plugging away. For as heavy as its losses may be, Russia's war machine still churns. More equipment, more missiles, more artillery, more people. Putin is able to get it all because there's a hidden power lying behind Russia's leader that keeps this machine running. That power is not only essential to Putin maintaining his position as Russia's president, but it's one he's learned to control during his reign. Without it, Putin is toast, and he knows it. What is that power? The Russian oligarchs. In this video,
as we see, Donald Trump has the richest people in America and abroad under his control, or on his side, let's say. You can check out my TikTok, I'm Just Saying, and there should be a link below to that to check out that video. So the largest energy companies and things of that nature are all owned by the oligarchs. Sound familiar? Getting the picture now? Good. Just know this. It's no mistake that this stuff is happening. It's not because Elon's the best at running businesses and that's why he's the richest person in the world. This is a dictator takeover. Make no mistake about it. I want to know from your perspective, what's the full court plan to stop this? And give me examples in history of current dictators with this war's technology being stopped by a democratic process. I challenge you. Tell me,